You have 22 million views, 180,000 subscribers, and you don't show your face on your channel.
If I would have known then what I know now, I never would have shown my face. Nobody would ever know who I am.
Ty, it's
Yeah.
nice to have you here.
Nice to be here, Arlan. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I stumbled upon a video of yours. I do think that YouTube put it in front of me, which it's really good at. And it was a Titanic video, and you have a few of those. And I just thought it was so creative and interesting. And so I want to talk to you about your YouTube journey. When you started it in 2019, or at least that's when the earliest videos are that I can see, in 2019, it seemed like you originally were going to do some sort of current gossip. Is that what you were going for?
Yes, originally it was.
Why did you decide to start a YouTube channel to begin with?
Out of sheer boredom. I am originally from Houston, and I left Houston to go and work on something that I was hoping was going to be really big. It failed, a construction project in St. Lucia. And then came back to Texas, but not to Houston. I came back to Killeen, and I worked at the military base there, and there was nothing to do there. So I was just like, okay, I can start a YouTube channel. I was watching YouTube, I was engaging with people in their content. So it was just a creative outlet at first, and it wasn't really creative when it started, but I was just thinking, okay, I'll give this a try. And so that's how it started, out of boredom.
And when you started with that angle, was that because in general you like that type of content?
I am really late to YouTube and all kinds of social media. And when I started watching YouTube, I thought that's all that there was. I found my first video on YouTube because I was watching something that I'm ashamed to say I enjoyed now, but back then it was Bad Girls Club. And I was hoping, I was like, well, they never show the fights. Like maybe that's what that YouTube thing, maybe I can go there and see like what really happened.
Yeah.
And so I found people who were reviewing reality shows. And a lot of those people who were reviewing reality shows were also talking about celebrity gossip. And so the first group of people that I watched, that's all that I saw. I didn't know that there were other spaces in YouTube that existed for the longest.
And when you say you're late to YouTube, you started in 2019. There are people right now who have not started their channels at all or put one video up. So everybody that I hear from who hasn't started feels like they're late. Everyone feels like they've just, YouTube has been around for 17 years.
Yes.
And today you can post a video that gets seen by other people.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Now, when I say that I'm late, I'm talking about late as even watching YouTube and even what YouTube was.
Your first video seemed to be current. And then it looked like for a few months you started looking at maybe R&B fights and gossip from the 60s through the 80s, something like that, 1960s through the 1980s.
Yes.
And what I noticed about your second video was you said at the beginning of it, I'm thinking about trying something new. I want to see what you all think. Yeah. And when you did that video, did you get those comments and that feedback that, oh yeah, we like this?
I did, and I'll say to an extent. I kept trying because I got a good reaction. One thing suddenly changed for me, and it was when I put out a video. It's my most watched video that's not a short on my channel. It's just a story about Bobby Womack and Sam Cooke and a lot of drama that went on even after Sam Cooke died. And that was just a story that I was telling at work. I have 20 years of construction project management. That's like what I was doing for a living. And I told one of my inspectors this story, and he went telling everybody, at work, the story. He's like, man, but you gotta listen to the way Ty tells it. Oh, she tells it so good. And so I had people running up to me at work asking me, hey, Steve was talking about some story. What is this story that you told? And so I told them. And so I'm like, well, let me try to tell this story on YouTube. It's going to take me a little bit more than what I feel comfortable with in terms of storytelling and the editing that I know that I'm going to have to do for it. I knew the audio was trash when I heard it, but my thought was that then my channel had 3,000 subscribers. And I was like, 200-300 views a video. I'm like, what? Nobody's going to see this anyway. Let me just put this video up. And like usual, nobody watched it for the first couple of months. And then one Friday I was at work, and back then I had my notifications on and my notifications just going off. And then I was seeing every 30 minutes, another 500 views. And for me, that had never happened before. And so that's when I really said, okay, now I'll double down. Like, okay, this is the content that I'll do. That was Memorial Day weekend. I'll never forget it. I had 3,000 subscribers when the weekend started. And by the time the weekend was over, I had 6,000 subscribers, 3 to 500,000 views. I can't remember, but it just like took off and I couldn't believe it. And so I'm like, okay, I know a ton of these stories. I read a lot of books about these people and they all tell their own business. So I'll just start telling these stories. People just don't know, you know?
That is so, so interesting to me. And that is not even where the story ends, because then about the top of 2022, you start doing what you had done for a couple of years with this sort of scandal and telling the behind the scenes story of Deep Dive for things that were even further back in history that none of us today were alive for.
Yeah.
How did that happen? Was that another kind of happy accident?
No, this was really intentional, and especially since December. I was getting compared to someone on YouTube all the time, and it was, well, you're not as nice as this person is, blah, blah. And so I went to finally check out who that person was. And I'm like, okay, well, they tell a full story. I just tell like a scandal. And I'm not trying to make it seem like that's all that this person was, but that's the only part that I'm telling because everybody knows that this person sold millions of records and this person did this tour, but they don't know, that they had this child that nobody talks about or.
Hmm.
So that's all that I wanted to tell. What I noticed was that people were still a little bit too close and too sensitive about those topics. And so,
Because it was so recent in our
yeah,
memory, and some
yeah,
people were still living.
right, for a lot of them. And it felt odd to me because because I did start doing like the current stuff, I had people who were really interested in the 90s. And that's not really a place that I thought was historical enough for my taste. But I was thinking, okay, like going 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, those celebrities aren't really popping. And like maybe I can talk about it and people won't. But like the way that people are like Beyonce stans and Nicki Minaj stans, and you can't say anything or the Beehive is going to come for you. That's the way that I had like women who are my mother's age coming for me when I talk about Teddy Pendergrass or, Marvin Gaye or someone. So it's
Hmm.
like, okay, it's the same kind of thing. And so I'm like, let me just go a little bit further back and I can still tell the same kind of story, but I can tell a more full story. And then I can put a little bit of education in it just to give, some of the history of why these things happen. Because another thing that I would always see, if we talk about, like, let's just say the history of slavery. You'll get people saying, "Oh, well, if I was living back then, I would have da 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 da. They wouldn't have been able to." I'm like, "Yeah, you're the person who won't even ask your boss for a 1% raise. You're telling me you were gonna, run around and be, start
That's
a."
so interesting. Yeah,
And
yeah.
so when I tell stories, like let's say a woman was being controlled by her husband or something, and then we look at it in our 2024 eyes and say, oh, well, she should have just left him and, she could have, well, but, she couldn't have done that back then. That wasn't the thing.
Hmm. So
That's
you wanted
part of,
to sort of enlighten people while entertaining them.
yeah,
Because your channel to me is a rare type that does both entertains and educates. And so back in December of 2023, when you made this conscious decision to do that, even prior to that, you were doing these types. What was that thought process of I want to do specifically these, 1870 to 1940, understood going further back than you
yeah.
were, but then why those dates?
So there is a show that I love. Why is it escaping me now? So I do love Downton Abbey,
Hmm.
but what people are calling is like the Downton Abbey for this century is the Gilded Age. Is
Oh, yes.
another Julian Fellows show. And I knew that people were interested in that period. And I was just thinking, okay, maybe if I can just center content around that show, then that might be a good thing. And I even tried my hand at kind of just reviewing the show, but I knew that I wanted to do something more than that because I knew some of the real stories behind the show. And then I would watch the behind the scenes stuff and, hear Julian Fellows himself or even some of the characters talk about who their characters are based off of, or, they have real life people in the show, but I don't expect for them to tell their whole story. We're just happy that we got another season to watch. So I'm like, okay, well, let me tell them like what really happened with this person. And that was intentional. It was something that I wanted to do a little bit before, after I attended Vid Summit, which was in October of last year. And so I came back with this new plan. I had learned some things about pivoting my channel and about storytelling, and I wanted to start telling more complete stories. The thought of editing it all was still like lingering in my mind. And I think that that's probably why I got sick after Vid Summit. I spent like almost the end of 2023 sick. And then in December, I was just like, okay, we're going to get 2 videos out this way. And that was all that I did besides walking my dogs. I didn't do anything else. I just focused on those. And I'm like, if they receive these well, then I'll know that this is where I can go.
Bridgerton is another one that I've seen you pull from a little bit. So
Mhm.
you have this great interest in certain periods of time. You have a great interest in human psychology and how people interact, in sociology, how people interact with each other. And instead of just being a consumer, you said, I'm going to create. So what happened when you did this in December of 2023? What happened to your channel?
Man, it's been so much better for my channel. Before, I was having to, like, I had no choice. I had to get out at least 1 video a week, but sometimes I would be doing at least 3 videos a week. And it's not like my workload has slowed down, but now I can put out 1 video a month, maybe 2, and I can still get the ad revenue that I want to get. But I've got this audience that's a little more chill. The comments are a little more chill now. People are just like, oh, those rich Titanic people, instead of my favorite star, how dare you?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's a
And
little.
the numbers are staggering. You put out a video last month here in summer of 2024, and it's been maybe 4 to 6 weeks since you put it out, which is I think the one I saw for the first time. It has like 340,000 views. So
Yeah.
when you put out a video in the first hour, do you see it pick up? Like, do you know a number? Oh, if it does that number, I know it's gonna do well.
I'll say yes and no, because typically what I'm seeing now is that they all do well over time. And
Mm,
so I'll say, like, I have a goal that I like, yeah, it'd be nice. And so my rule of thumb would be if I can get whatever my subscriber count is, if I can get 10% of that in a 24-hour period, I think that I'll say this is like a mark of success. The video that you're referring to that I put out last month, it went beyond that. It went bananas. And so I'm like,
mhm.
okay, I know that this is going to be good for now, but there are some times you get your 10 most recent uploads.
Yes.
They tell you how they're performing, ranking 1 through 10. And I used to let like a 10 just get me down, like, okay, let me hurry up and put out something new. But now those 10s, it's kind of just a slow burn now. It'll get to
Yeah.
where it needs to
Yeah.
get. And I
Yeah.
trust YouTube to find the audience for it.
So let's pull two things from that. The first thing is that since you've had 20,000 subscribers and now you have 180,000 or so, and depending on when someone's watching this, it'll be a lot more. You have said to yourself, if a video in the first 24 hours gets 10% of that in views, so for 20,000 subscribers, it gets 2,000 views. For 179,000 subscribers, it gets 18,000 views in the first 24 hours. So no matter where you are, if you have 100 subscribers, you can say this to yourself. Then you think it's going to probably perform better than the rest. But at
Yes,
the same time, which is a great, great thing to think about. It's like a great number to have in mind. I've never heard anybody say that. And the second thing is, even if it doesn't perform that well at the beginning, you have come to understand after 5 years that it doesn't matter what it does in the first day or the first
right.
week or even the first couple of months,
Yes.
because YouTube is here to get you, not necessarily get you out, but to help the viewer find what they need.
Absolutely. And not only that, this is also why I stress evergreen content. So to go back to your question about why I'm doing what I do now versus what I was doing then. So after I got monetized on YouTube, which, I kept hearing about, I didn't even know that that was a thing that you could happen for a person. Because again, I just wanted to talk to people. My first videos were live streams and they were pathetic. At first, nobody there, like for 3 weeks. And I remember being so excited when this guy, I'll never forget, his name is Rye Doughboy. Some guy in England was just watching me blab about stuff, and he's in the comments. And so I'm talking to him just like I have 100 people there. I'm, replying to his comment, moving on to my next topic. And I remember feeling after a while that I'm like, maybe I should just give him my phone number and I could just tell him this stuff and get off of YouTube and let somebody else. But then I remember, okay, getting 3 people coming on a regular basis and then 7. And that was great. But that's when I was doing the current topics. And I was also working a full-time job, 10 to 14 hours, trying to get some construction projects built. And I got a mentor. And for anything that I've ever wanted to do, I've always just gotten a mentor who I admired, who does it well. And it didn't start out as a mentorship. It was another YouTube creator, Layla Lynn, who had a course. So I bought her course. She had a YouTube course for $125 that she was selling about the basics of YouTube and getting your channel started. The offer of, if you get it done right, maybe having some financial freedom. And I was like, even if it becomes just a profitable side hustle or something, that could be good. But just knowing that, hey, they might pay me for this.
Mm-hmm.
And so I did that. And within her course, which she doesn't sell any longer, she had a module about evergreen content. And I'd never heard that term before, but I'm like, okay, well, with myself being a person who's working and I want to cover these hot topics, but by the time that I cover them, they're not hot because the people who do this full time, they've covered all this stuff. And then who cares if, like, now this girl with 30 subscribers is talking about what my favorite YouTuber just talked about 2 days ago, because I had to get home, I had to read up on the thing, and then I had to formulate an opinion, then put out a video, edit it, which I was very slow at doing. And so then I'm like, okay, well, what if I still talk about the stuff that people are doing or were doing, but I can now I don't have to worry about someone getting out the video before I do. I'll just talk about some of this old stuff.
Yeah.
And and I don't have to worry about getting scooped for my story, because who's thinking about Marvin Gaye right now? Everybody's talking about Nicki Minaj. And so that's how it started. And it became a thing for me as a working person with a full-time job to be able to get out content that could still have a little bit of that same audience, but who just likes celebrity gossip. But now I don't have to worry about getting it out so fast and have that pressure. And so that's something anybody who is going into YouTube, if you've got something that you can talk about in an evergreen format, meaning something that's going to be just as relevant today and 5 years from now, when YouTube will find that audience. When they see that, if you can put out content like that, maybe you're teaching someone how to do something, maybe educating someone, maybe it is just entertaining someone. But I know that as long as I was doing hot topics, it wasn't going to do that for me. And so
Mm-hmm.
that's another reason why I switched. But
Mm-hmm.
Layla Lynn's course, and then she started to mentor me. I was emailing her questions because I'm going through her course. And I'm like, well, what does this mean? Or how do you do that? Or, how do you know that? And she offered to mentor me. And I was blown away. If you've got anything that you can tell people about that's going to be relevant like that, I really, really suggest that that's the route you go instead of trying to keep up with the people who are doing it already full time.
Yeah, the evergreen. Because my brother, who has 1 million subscribers, almost 400 million views, his is hot topic, but they put out 3 to 5 videos every day because that's what you do when you do the news, and you have to do that. So you can do that for sure
Yeah.
if you have the time and
Yeah.
the kind of infrastructure. But you're saying, hey, I can put a video up once a month now and it'll do well. Let's talk about the monetization side. We don't have to get into anything you don't want to, but when you started getting monetized, was your goal to be able to quit your job? Or was it once you learned, okay, this is how it works?
My original goal was not to be able to quit my job because I loved construction management. I loved everything about it. So that was not the original goal. I didn't know what to expect. My first check wasn't a check because I didn't even clear the $100 threshold. So for those of you who are, starting your channel, when you hear about getting monetized, you're paid by ad revenue, and you have to clear $100 to get that check. And my first check was $29. So like I'm like, oh, I don't even get paid, and I've been putting out videos. And so I was like, okay, well, it's probably gonna take me 3 months before I get paid. And then the 3 months came and it was $99.23.
Mm.
So my first check was like 129.32, something like that. And I was like, okay, this is cute, and pay a water bill and get lunch and some gas money or whatever.
Yeah.
And I was just like, but yeah, it's something. And so I had no goals as far as like what the money would do until I started to make a little bit more. Once I got a little more training and got a little more focus on what the content was going to be, then I said, okay, I knew that I wanted to make a certain amount. I was like, if I can just make $1,000 a month, like that'll help me save some money. It'll help me do some things. And I was also putting money back into the channel as well. Obviously, I had to get a microphone right away because my mic was fried. I invested in more courses. I invested in equipment, and a computer, software that I would need, stuff like that. Everything always went back into it because I like this could turn into something, the more that I would, talk to people. And I was also on radio at the time in Houston doing talk radio on a sports show on KCOH AM
Mhm.
radio.
I mean, I got that from you. I was like, I hope you have done something in media because there's something about you that it's not just how you talk or that it's also just how you kind of your lens, how you take things and are able to articulate it outwardly. So you were doing radio, you were doing a job you loved in construction, and you started monetizing. Can you talk a little bit about your RPMs, or would you rather not?
I don't mind. So at first they were low. When I was kind of just doing the let's see what's trending on Twitter and talk about it, they were around $5 or less.
And
Uh,
let's just tell everybody what that means if you don't know is how much YouTube will pay you per thousand views. There's
right,
a CPM and then there's an RPM. CPM is how much YouTube is being paid by the advertiser, and then the RPM is your cut of that. And
right.
so different topics and genres and channels have different ones, and different videos have different RPMs.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, but now my RPMs are no, like $10 is low for me now.
Mm,
15 is a good average for where I am now,
yeah.
even with me, and it's still, scandalous content. It's still talking about messy stuff, but it has educational value because of the history element that's brought into it. So YouTube looks at it a little bit differently, I guess.
Yeah, and you think about who would be advertising on that. It's if you think about even the recent one that is about the car that was in the Titanic movie, that's this famous car and the whole story about that. There could be, it's probably older people now watching that than there were before,
Absolutely.
potentially.
Yes.
And those who might be looking at something to buy something that costs a lot more than a teenager might want to buy or a young adult.
100%. I'm glad you brought that up because that's another advantage that I gained with talking about topics that are much older. Typically, older people seem to be a little more interested in history. And for some people who are watching my channel, they were alive in those times. They were children, but they'll say, I remember my grandmother taking me to Woolworths or, whatever the thing might be. With an older audience also comes an audience who is used to watching commercials. And so they won't skip those ads. They're less likely to skip those ads than people who are 40 and under who are,
That's interesting.
just,
Let's
so,
talk about that just for a second for anybody who doesn't understand that. So, the reason you're getting paid by YouTube is because YouTube is placing short ads, for the most part, short
right,
ads throughout your video. You can select which ads placement you want. You can move them around. You can actually delete some of them if you want. You'd make less money. It depends on your preference of how many ads you want someone to see. And not every single ad is shown
right.
based on that. But the fewer times someone skips, the more you're going to get in that RPM. So that's a lot of psychology. So for something that has done 300,000 views, maybe it's made $3,000 for you. If it's like a $10 RPM, 300,000 views, 300 times 10, and you do one of those a month or you do one of those a quarter that hits like that, that's interesting. It's interesting
Yes,
money, right? It's not necessarily going to retire you, but
right.
it's interesting money. And the idea is you could grow. Could it grow to even more, 10 times that? And if you grew to 10 times or 5 times that, you could do that for,
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
yeah. So how do you think about that when you think today, the strategy?
As far as monetization, that's why actually I found you because that's the only way that I'm getting paid right now. I don't
Mm-hmm.
have sponsorships. It's not that I'm not offered. I haven't come across the brand that I think is a good fit for my audience. I don't want to piss off my audience at the end
Yeah,
of the day.
yeah. And
Um,
sponsorships really aren't the only way either. They're not the only way. And so many people kind of have, I've been offered sponsorships too for my channel. I'm like, no, you know what I want to do? I want to be the sponsor of my channel. I
mm,
want to promote. So to kind of to bounce the question back, because I know we had started talking about that on email, there are other ways, and I think it has to do with having your own product or having your own. So it's either you saying, how do I take this, everything that I've learned, and somehow level up to having 1 million views per video, and that really churning out low to mid six figures every year, and that being the play, which I think is possible for you.
Yeah.
Or you could look at, is there a product that I could sell that would make sense for what I do and for what my audience wants and for what would be not a heavy lift to produce? So is that a digital product to help people go from no views to figuring out what their channel should be about? I know that's a big question. Or is it a course like the one that you took that taught you certain things that made you get this far? Or is it a physical product? Is it some sort of apron or some, I'm just making things up as I
Right.
go here, but is it some sort of trinket or something that your audience, they've loved these videos, they've loved these stories. So what could you tie in there? And which is a little bit more difficult because of supply chain. That is how I see, at first blush, what you could do next.
And I appreciate that.
I see another way for you is kind of what Nolan Molt does. And there's a video of Nolan and I speaking inside of Arlan's All Access. If you go into weeks 1 through 4, I just added that as a bonus a few days ago. He's a YouTube expert. And what he did was he started a small cohort of about 20 people who wanted to be very serious about YouTube, and he charged them $1,250 each. And so what is that, 25,000? So he did that, and it was a 6-week sort of virtual boot camp. And that way he did it through what we do at Arlen's All Access through school. I wouldn't do the full year. I would do 6 to 8 weeks boot camp. What can you teach people? Because so many people are at the beginning stages of where you are.
Yeah.
And what could you jump on a Zoom every week and help them with? What could you put into the curriculum? What could you do there? And you have this live boot camp that happens. Now, some people can do that once a year for 6 weeks. Some people can do that every 6 weeks. It just kind of depends on your style.
Got it. That's interesting because I have done a little bit of coaching.
Mm-hmm.
And I have one person who I'm really proud of. She's so close to 100,000 subscribers
Amazing.
right
I
now.
mean, that's what you need. All you need is that testimonial. Like I did it for me. It wasn't a fluke because I also helped her do it. And the value of someone paying you $1,000, $2,000 to learn something that can make them 20,000 plus a year, or just put their message out and help their brand in a different way is immeasurable. Can you talk a little bit about people who are like, I'm not good on camera, or I don't have the right equipment, or whatever kind of, not excuse, but thing that they're putting in front of them as a barrier?
To go faceless, it could end up being that maybe it's a bigger time investment, especially if you don't know how to edit, or maybe you'll pay an editor. But to go faceless, you don't have to worry about having a 4K camera or a bunch of gadgets and really cool lighting and all of that. So you don't even have to have spectacular editing. I did not at first. I mean, my editing was basic. Just if I'm talking about something and I can put it on the screen, keep it simple. If you're doing it on your own, and you save so much money that way. So yeah, if you don't feel comfortable being on camera, don't let that stop you from getting out a message. If you have a message to get out or something to share, don't let anything stop you. Just do it, and you'll figure out things as you go.
Is there anything that we didn't cover that you think is really important for someone, especially for two people? Someone who's just starting, but they understand that they need to probably get out there on YouTube because it's a good moment to do that. And then maybe for someone who has been doing what you're doing, it's 100,000 plus subscribers, and they don't think there's much to learn from this. What, is there anything you could say to the first type?
Okay, so for the person who's just starting, my biggest advice literally is to just do it and to be okay with making mistakes. Be okay if your first 5, 10, 20 videos don't just knock it out of the park. Don't make 100 videos with the intention that they're going to be crappy. They're probably going to be crappy by the standards of people who you really like to watch, who do what you do, but you'll get better with each time. And so just put in the reps like anything else. Be prepared for ups and downs. Be prepared for weirdos in your comment section. It's okay. 100% of the time, those people either don't have a channel, so they don't know what it takes for you to put yourself out there like that. Or they do have a channel and it is not thriving. Because if it was, they would be spending time on their own channel, making their own content, not trolling the internet, looking for people to disparage.
So true. Like when I see bad comments come through, I have to approve each comment. So none of that's being seen by anybody else, first of all. And second of all, when I see it, every blue moon I'll click on something and they
Mhm.
don't have anything going on in their lives. It's a tinfoil situation. And
Yeah.
now for someone who is more seasoned and they're growing, what's on the other side of that 100K subscribers?
For the person who has 100,000 subscribers and thinks that he or she has nothing to learn, my best advice is that you do have something more to learn because YouTube is changing all the time. There are more people coming in who are hungry, and it is still a bit of a competition. If you've made it this far, then you know that you have to fight for those views. You're the one who needs to be selective when people are scrolling on their computer screens and there's 12 images. You want to fight for that view. You want them to click on yours and not the other 11. And there are a lot of people who've been watching, thinking about YouTube. Some people aren't coming in with no education. Some people have been plotting and looking at the content about how to make good videos before they put out their first video. So their first 100 videos are not crappy. And, it's not like they're going to necessarily take your spot, but you've got competition coming. And so do everything you can to stay up on your education. YouTube wants to replace television. After I started making that change to my content in December, this January was the first month that I had more than 50% of the people who watched me start watching me on TV. That's something that helps your RPMs to go up as well. So no, like there's always something more to learn, always.
Thank you so much. It was amazing, amazing advice for everyone.
I'm just glad to know that I wasn't getting trolled when I got the email. I was like, okay,
That was me.
thank you.